My voice, everything sound okay, right? We good?
Yes, sir. We're live now, Doc.
Oh, good evening, everyone. Um, this is Roger Kane, Dr. Kane. We're on Welcome to Pause for the Truth. Usual, my co-host is running a little behind today, but she promised she was going to come and rescue me. And so we'll just get started with the show. We do have our technological guru. He is joining me. Tyrone, you might have to come up center stage.
All righty, all righty. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to come from behind the scenes every now and again.
Every now and again. Well, we always welcome your insight, whether it's from behind the scene or you're sitting on the, um, for lack of a better description, hot seat, like the rest of us. Okay, today's show is I'm gonna have to start out with a disclaimer, and that is, it was a difficult time trying to get the guests for our shows because everyone was still out of town or had not gotten back from their holiday enjoyments. So we just thought what we would do is go ahead and do an open mic. Anyone that has anything to discuss, anything they want to talk about, we felt like we just opened the mic up. We did that once before, did pretty good, but of course we had the superstar with us at that time, so we'll just wait. We will be awaiting her arrival with anticipation and joy when she does show. Meantime, uh, Tyrone, is there anything that you have on your mind that anybody may join you in terms of the discussion?
Well, well, Doc. First of all, it's always a pleasure to be able to just talk with you. You and I have enjoyed great conversations in passing, and it's a pleasure to be able to do this here and let others hear. As I was thinking about this here, I thought about it. I said, it's been almost 42 episodes.
Right.
And I thought, I said, well, then if Dr. Kane and I just have to sit on the microphone and talk today, what are we going to talk about? And I said, well, you know what? Let's take a look at where we are from where our concept and idea was.
Right.
And
Okay.
it's stated on our website. We had a very simple premise. That premise was simply this here, that a pause for the truth was dedicated to bringing you, the listener, information. Every week, we would make a decision to bring on professionals in their fields and share information and educate you about things that everyone needed to know. So, my first question to you, Dr. Kane, do you think we've held true to that mission thus far in these 42 episodes?
I think we've held true to the mission to the extent that everything that we brought forth thus far is information that many, if not most, of our listeners could use. We
Absolutely.
haven't brought everything. That's the only little a snippet that I'd have to have some contentious, I don't want to say rejection, but objection to, and that is that we brought everything because there are so many things out there to discuss, so much knowledge to help bring to our listeners, so much knowledge our listeners have brought to us, as well as our panelists, and so we have a long way to go, which will be forever if we thought about when we talk about bringing everything. But we're going to keep pushing and bring anything as we can to the um, to the forefront for our listeners to be able to enjoy, to be able to ask questions, uh, and hopefully to be learned and we be learning at the same time. Um, so yeah, I think we've done a fairly good job. We're gonna do better um, because we our heart is in it, and as long
Yes.
as your heart is in it, you know, I'm not gonna say nothing else matters, but we have intentions on making sure that we can bring to all of our listeners the best information we can. We discuss things like, high rent. COVID was a very, very, a very numerous episodes COVID took up, and rightfully so. We talked about mental health. We've talked about how, cholesterol and diabetes and many medical topics. We've discussed clinical research. We've been over quite a few things that, if you look at, as you say, go to our website and check out pauseforthetruth.com, and you will see many of the things that we discussed. But what you'll also note is many of the things that we need to continue, that will continue to drive us to bring more information to our audience. I see we now have my savior for today again, Jocelyn Turner.
Stop it, Dr. Kane. What are you saying? What does that mean? You were doing such a fine job, and we have Tyrone Jackson. He came from behind the screen to on screen tonight.
He sure did.
Yes.
Look at, and he started the conversation out right. Tyrone, run Miss Turner. I'm gonna let Tyrone tell you real quick what he had to say so that we don't lose the fluidity of our discussion.
All righty, Dighty.
Right. Well, I was talking with Dr. Kane, and as I was thinking of, where could we go with this episode? There has been a beauty to our process, and I've enjoyed working with you two immensely. But I wanted to look back on what was our original goal. What did we have set in mind that year of planning before Pause for the Truth went live? And that's what Dr. Kane and I were talking about. And Dr. Kane, as always, you led right into the next thing I wanted to go into, and that is the shows that we have produced, the topics that we have discussed, the things and the information that we have given to our listeners. That is, in my opinion, the power of what Pause for the Truth started to be, is to be, and will be. And then Miss Johnson, you come on, and for those who are just viewing this here for the first time, let's tell you a little bit about Miss Jocelyn Turner that I've discovered being behind the scenes. See, there are a lot of things that you get to see behind the scenes that our listeners sometimes don't get to see. First of all, she's a consummate professional. The way she carries herself on screen is the way she carries herself in person. So it's very easy for her to be very personable when she is hosting a show. I personally like that. I think our listeners like that. I think Dr. Kane finds that easy to lean on because of that. That's an essence of her personality. Now, for those who have watched the show, you'll see she doesn't have her afro today. I've been on her time and time again. I'm an old athlete, and as athletes, we always believe don't undo what you've been doing. If you've been fixing that afro for 49 episodes, then you need to keep on fixing it. So, but I did want to go over just some of the titles of episodes that we have covered. And then I'm going to turn it over to Miss Johnson. I'm sure she has a direction she wants us to go. I was just being a filler. When you get from behind the scenes, sometimes you put your foot in your mouth. But the beauty is I can always edit it out later.
And then some big feet.
But let's look at, we did theology and COVID-19. At the time, no one else was talking about that.
Right.
It was all but being ignored. Now, we know that for the last few years, COVID has been a very prominent presence in all walks of life. But we felt bold enough to take it on from a theological standpoint. Then we talked about kids and COVID. At that time, there was a lot of information and questions about whether or not kids are going to be vaccinated, should be vaccinated, can be vaccinated. Well, we wanted to give you information from professionals on whether or not they could be, whether or not they, and where the technology was. Now, I'm not going to go over all the episodes, but I think it's important for people to flash back in this moment to truly see some of the topics that we have discussed. We felt bold enough to talk about why worry about climate change. All right, so we're
And we're
living in
going
a
to
world.
revisit that. We're going to revisit that, Tyrone, because some of
Yes,
those episodes were well worth the topics were well worth revisiting. And so I'm glad
absolutely.
you brought that up.
And
Proceed.
then we talked about let's talk about childhood hunger in Northeast Florida. I mean, the information that comes forth when you really take time to consider the number of children that are going to bed hungry in one of the wealthiest countries in the world. It pricks your heart, and that's one of the things that we wanted to do. We talked about what men need to know about prostate cancer. Now, from a male standpoint, I know a person who's had prostate cancer, and until having that podcast, I did not take the seriousness until after hearing that. So I say that to say that in doing these podcasts, there has been a serendipitous uh, aspect to it. We have learned. There are things that I've heard and discovered that have helped me change and make changes in my life. So it is beautiful that we've had an opportunity to do that. We we had a month where we talked about juvenile justice, Black youth in crisis, and wow, what a interesting flurry of conversation came from that. And it was beautiful to be involved because as adults, we have to be mindful of the challenges that are set before our youth today. And so it's beautiful to have to talk about that. We talked about getting the facts on healthy aging, healthy aging. So, in other words, you can age gracefully. There are things that are due: diet, health, exercise. You know what I'm saying? And when you listen to the professionals, the one thing that sticks out for me time and time again was not to try to do it all in one exercise routine, not to try to do it all in one dietary plate. Plan small steps, do small and simple things, create habits to be better at taking care of your health. And,
One of the
and,
things that I took from that same episode, Tyrone, or one of the things I profess to people is always, for me, it's not about how long I live; it's the quality of life I have. And when you're talking about healthy living, that impacts the quality of life you have. Whether
yes,
or not it is from you being bedridden because you didn't watch your cholesterol, blood pressure, diabetes, and you had a stroke, heart attack, or whatever it may be. My whole thing was about the quality of life and what I can do to impact my quality of life. At least, I mean, you can't guard against everything, but some things you can go on ahead and do for yourself and not wait for someone else, not wait for God to tell you, didn't I tell you to stop eating all that chocolate cake or whatever it might be as it relates to diabetes. I think you guys get my drift with that one. So
yes.
Well, I can tell
Now,
you, Tyrone, as you were looking back over all the topics that we've talked about, and thank you, Dr. Barbell Johnson, for the nice comment about the work that we've done. Of course, we know we can't do it by ourselves. As you mentioned, the Northeast Florida Medical Society, of which you are you and Dr. King are both members, and all the things that you do in the community. So, Tyrone, just to even recap last week's conversation, you all would not believe the number of texts and phone calls I received from people because, quite frankly, they learn more about how to manage their blood pressure than ever before, as mentioned to me. They are now, some have professed, now whether or not it's true, but they professed to me anyway, that they were going to start watching the amount of sodium that they intake, their sodium intake each day. Never paid attention to it, didn't know there was a difference between the amount of sodium that African Americans could have versus other populations. I think Ms. Brown, Dr. Kane, and Dr. Foy gave a real good historical perspective of how food was cured and processed, and people said, oh my gosh, you're making this thing easy for me. What am I going to eat from now on? So that's why when we have conversations about managing different chronic diseases like high blood pressure, diabetes, we always try to have a registered dietitian on to really give people those simple things that they can do. A couple of weeks ago when we talked about diabetes, and Juana brought that big glob of fat just to show people,
Juana was a dietitian. Don't forget.
Registered dietitian, certified diabetes educator. And she just showed you, like, this is what you're carrying around. So for every 5 pounds that some of us who are overweight that we carry around, I mean, literally, if you get a 5 pound, sometimes, have you ever gone to the gym and the trainer will tell you, okay, so pick up a weight, and for ladies, and I know because I'm guilty, I'm going to go to the half pound weight if there's one there, the 1 pound, right? The lightweight. No, come on, you can do more, right? But if you, next time you go to the gym, even if you get a 5 pound bag of sugar or flour and you see how heavy that is, that's what you carry around when you talk about the extra weight. And I have to say this, and I mean no disrespect to anyone. I promise I'm giving my disclaimer in advance. This past weekend, I attended the Jacksonville Jazz Festival. And again, because I've mentioned it to Dr. Kane before, it saddens me when I see so many people struggling with extra weight, talking about what foods to avoid because they didn't want to aggravate their diabetes or their cholesterol or their blood pressure. And so when the city and anybody who has events, they should take those things into consideration. And I thought that the city did a somewhat decent job in offering different options for people in terms of, they had salad, cold plate salad for people who needed to watch what they eat in terms of not fried food, right? But still, when you see all of those things around, you're tempted, right? But I shared with some folks earlier today that when the pandemic started, as an example, I said that I was going to use that as an opportunity to work on me, right? And if only everybody had done that, because we were on lockdown, we weren't going out to eat as much. Dr. Kane said, I think one of your culprits is going out with your friends, eating, that's good for mental health, right? But it wasn't good for dress size, right? And so when you had the opportunity, when we were all on lockdown, it really was an opportunity for us to self-reflect in so many ways. Tyrone, we talked a few days ago, we text every day, obviously. We were talking about crime. Crime was down. So many things were down at the height of the pandemic. But as things started easing back, crime rates went up. The weight on the scales went up because more people were going out socializing with friends. I mean, all the things that affect your quality of life, unfortunately, started happening, and people were reverting back to those same bad habits that we all had prior to the pandemic. But I think, I know that the pandemic, it made all of us think differently about life. It should have anyway, because it's not something many of us can say we ever experienced a pandemic throughout our lives. So it really was, and what I like about this show is that, you know, we keep our ears and our eyes open to know what's happening in our community. But Dr. Kane and Tyrone and I, we know that we don't know everything about everything. So we try to identify folks who we feel are the experts in the community, from the representatives of law enforcement, for example, because that's an area that I certainly don't know about. Representatives from the environmentalists to talk about. And by the way, I have to pause for a second, right? Because if you have never done a windshield tour in Jacksonville or in your community, because people may live everywhere, first of all, Google what a windshield tour is.
There you go.
And also look at a windshield tour from the perspective of the social determinants of health, those things that influence where we live, work, play. So the terminology that was brought to my attention, again, because of course I'd heard about it, are heat deserts. I know that I get unnerved when I see trees being uprooted for highways. The unfortunate part about having areas that are that's solely concrete and streets and parking lots and no trees around is, if a flood or something happens, there's no soil or any to soak up that extra water, right?
Or heat.
No vegetation, right? And then you even just think about that. And then, you know, in riding around with some folks the other day on uh, a windshield tour, I asked the question of some folks, when you get up in any given week, as you go out and about in the community, what are some places that you typically stop at? You may stop at a coffee shop, you may stop at a restaurant to get your favorite breakfast or a lunchtime lunch. And then you may say, oh, I need to stop by the grocery store to pick up dinner for my family. Well, in some of the communities we visited, none of those things were present, right? No coffee shop, no grocery store, no restaurant. Definitely no healthy choices of restaurants. You may see a plethora of liquor stores. You'll see a plethora of convenience stores,
Churches and Walgreens.
very minimal in terms of restaurants. You know, fast food restaurants, although they have unhealthy options. They do have healthy options, but it's just a matter of what you choose. So when we think about what is it that we can do, when we talked about what are we going to talk about tonight? I don't know if Dr. Kane or Tyrone opened with, oops, we forgot it was a holiday. And just because we're not holidaying, our other guest was like, I'm still holidaying. So we were like, okay, our usual listeners are going to have to listen to us. But when we think about what is it that we can do to make our community better, first of all, open your eyes. Drive around in communities that you are not familiar with. Also, think about those assets that are not in communities that will make the community healthy. And by the way, some of the parks that I've seen didn't look very parkish to me, didn't look very family oriented. Sure, it was a land that was the grass was mowed, and there was a sign that said it was a park, but there were no facilities out there for you to it was a safe place for you and your family to go, particularly your children. And then you think about what is it that I can do in terms of advocacy. I think, Dr. Kane, we need to do a show on advocacy in the future, because people don't think that they can advocate. Sure, you can. Number one, you can become a registered voter. That's how you advocate for the things that you feel are important in your community. You you register to vote, you find out what those issues are that make communities unhealthy, for example, in whatever area that is. And then when those candidates come to you, then you call them out on those things to say, these are the things that are important to me and my family and my community, and what are you going to do about it? And I promise you, you will stump some folks, because first of all, they're going to be shocked that you are prepared to ask them. And don't be selfish and just worry about having a skateboard park. Think about your grandma. Your grandma's not going to a skateboard park. Think about what your grandma need She needs sidewalks to take a walk. She needs a safe place to be able to walk in the community in terms of decrease in violence. You don't want to be fearful that your child is going to go out and somebody's going to grab them, right? Or that your child is going to get hit by a car because they have to play in the street because there are no sidewalks. So I think that's the thing that I wanted. I didn't mean to hog the discussion, but I think I'd like, what I'd like to pause for the truth about tonight is that people need to start paying more attention, but don't just post it on social media and say, oh, it's a shame that so-and-so and so-and-so. No, it's a shame that, but here's what I am going to do. And I am going to get my friends, and this is what we're going to do.
Let me say this real quick to a couple of things, and then I want Tyrone to, because he looked like he's eager to say something. Say this real quick. As far as the diet was concerned, some of the people did gain weight during COVID, and a lot of it was because that is exactly what they're working from home and snacking, and so we don't want to give the impression that only the people whom, that everybody lost weight from COVID. Some gained, but just circumstantial. But what it does beg to for us to pay attention to is that watch your diet, watch your exercise, watch your calorie intake, regardless of what you're doing. That's one. Two, when it comes down to climate change, I just think that people need to be aware that the fewer the trees we have, the more likely that we are going to increase global warming. And you're absolutely correct, Ms. Turner, when it comes down to resurfacing what was a natural habitat with a man-made habitat like tar, concrete, and whatever. And just making these little reservoirs off on the side of the road does not help us in terms of global warming. And then just for the last thing that you just mentioned, in terms of people and voting, I want people to be cognizant. I agree with you 100%. I just want people to be cognizant that politicians do not like being asked questions. I don't care how, I'm attesting to legitimate questions and concerns. Some politicians, I'm not going to label all of them, but don't like being asked questions of legitimate concerns and of valid concerns in front of other voters. So when you get an opportunity to ask your candidate for mayor, ask your candidate for city council, ask your candidate for state representative, senator, and or those that are national representatives, senators, whatever, you get a chance, ask them, express your concern, and ask them to please explain to you why this is necessary or why they take this position, such as gun rights. And that's one of those subject matters we did talk about way back when, but it needs to be addressed again in lieu of what what we've seen in the last couple of weeks. But ask them what about their position on it, and why do they have it? So I agree with you, Ms. Turner, 100%. And I was trying to refrain from using the word confront or confrontational, but it may be viewed as that. But you have to put people on the spot to give us their opinion and to justify their opinion, especially if it goes against what the majority of voters want. Especially if it goes against what the majority of voters want. And Tyrone?
Well,
hold on one second. I wanted to mention that this is an opportunity for you to for our listeners to chime in if they have specific things on their mind. So now is the opportunity for you to dial in to 904-469-8488. Again, 904-469-8488. and tell us what's on your mind. What's important to you? What's happening that you'd like to talk about? Obviously, respectfully to our audience, and as we try to be. And so when I mention stuff, and thank you, Dr. Kane, for even sharing that. Of course, I wasn't talking about everybody was out of shape or whatever at the jazz festival this weekend, but just saying that it's just an opportunity for us to self-reflect and look around. Hit it, Tyrone.
And I just wanted to say, like Dr. Kane said, I agree with your assessment of getting involved in voting and registering 100%. But there is a caveat to that. Registration is only part one of the process. We have to get truly involved. We have to get to the point where it's a part of our conversation with friends and family about these issues.
Very good.
You know, we have an opportunity in our communities. We can talk about everybody. Let's be honest. All right. So,
And
and
we
we
do
do a good,
talk about everybody.
and
But
we do a good job of it. Okay. But it is important that we add the community and the politics of our communities into that conversation. See, there's a disbelief that in order to be effective in voting and a position in politics is that you have to know everything. Well, if I know a little bit and I talk to Dr. Kane and he know a little bit and we talk to Miss Jocelyn and she know a little bit, at the end of that conversation, we all know more. And so the process needs to be refined so that there's communication amongst us with regards to. So when you hear about a politician who is not doing what they should be, or you hear about something that's happening in a community where we need to be stronger on our stance, the best we could do is to talk to other people about it. Don't keep it quiet. You know, the more people you inform, which is what Pause for the Truth was all about. The more people, the more people you inform, the more power we have as a community. And that's what I wanted to say with regards to what Miss Jocelyn was talking about, because I think that's just so true and so powerful.
let me say this real quick, Miss Turner, and then I'll let you go back. Tyrone did hit on exactly where I was headed with this. We've done a 360 as to why we wanted to do Pause for the Truth in the first place. It was for a community and a family discussion about things that mattered and that were important in the individuals and the community lives. We wanted to have the discussion amongst friends, families, strangers, voters, non-voters, politicians, those that are not politicians. We wanted a discussion, and we focus a lot on health matters because that is what the Northeast Florida Medical Society is all about. They are they are our parent organization, and because of that, we do a lot on health matters, but health matters.
Hmm.
Period. That's your whole world can be about health. If it's not your physical health, it's what we've discussed in the past, your mental health. All that falls up under the banner of health. Ms. Turner?
So I passed by a sign today, and I wish I could remember the facts, but I'm gonna ask Tyrone. Tyrone, go to jacksreads.org or jacksread.org. I don't know if it's an S on read, but it gave an interesting fact about if you read 20 minutes a day, it enhances your vocabulary or whatever. I forgot it was. And the point of it was right. It's a sign out, outside the Kids Hope Alliance building. And the point it was making, I believe, is in Jacksonville, I think schools are out already, or they will be soon if they are not already out. And what it's doing is encouraging, thanks Tyrone, encouraging families to keep your children's minds stimulated by simply having them to read every day. Now, for those who know me, you know I don't have any biological children, right? I say that because my friends, my nieces and nephews, you know, they made sure that I have some children in my life, right? I ask you, Tyrone and Dr. Kane, did you require and I forgive me in advance for putting you on the spot, but did you require your children to read when they were growing up, whatever books, you know, children's books or whatever, rather than relying so much on technology and television?
Well, I'm gonna take it first because I would put all of that off on my wife. You know, she was adamant. So I mean, she was so much about reading, reading, reading. She read to the kids when they were in her womb. I mean, because she had read something that said if you read to them while they're in the, in the womb, it they do this, that, and the other. And that first one especially is one in which um, she did a whole lot of reading. You know, the first and then the second, everything tends to wane off a little bit as you go down the numbers. But that first one, she do all of them do a lot of reading, much more than their dad ever did. But that first one, she converts her reading into this. She she's got the gift for gab. And she reads some of everything. So I would say that I concur 100% that reading is, as they say, fundamental. Excuse the pun. Reading is fundamental. That you should try for those who are verbally, auditorily stimulated, like moi. You know, then go get books to listen to where somebody else is reading to you on different subject matters. Even if there are a lot of people that have attention deficit disorders and yada yada yada. I can honestly say I have a certain level of that. So I understand, and by treating patients, I do understand that there's some that can't stay focused on reading as much as they are from hearing, auditory stimulus. So, but you still get to hear and even though it's listening, get to hear and read a book.
Well, and then I'm gonna piggyback off of that, and I'm gonna say great men marry alike because my wife took the same took the same path, and that has, of course, enhanced our boys and their reading. But I will tell you that with the grandchildren, I take a more active
Yeah,
involvement in reading, and not just reading, but um, educational things that I found of benefit to me when I was growing up. My youngest grandson is only 2, and when he comes out in the office, he loves to come out in the office because the computers and screens and everything is just
right.
beautiful. And I have him sit with me, and we listen to Schoolhouse Rock
Uh,
multiplication. And I was telling his parents, I said, you guys are laughing, but at 2, he's going to be able to know his timetables.
yep.
He's already decided that 3, he likes that song the best. So, and it is something that I've done on purpose over the years, having talked to my wife, who was the mainstay in doing that with the kids, and now I have an opportunity to pass that on to the young to my grandkids. So it is it's a beautiful and powerful tool, and that's the part that we have to remember, that reading is a powerful tool. The love and enjoyment of reading is a powerful tool. It's been said many ways and many times, but if you want to hide something from us, where you put it in a book.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, and it is because of the path we've had to take to learn to read.
Schoolhouse Rock. It really does rock. You know, I'm just a bill.
See what I'm saying?
I
One of
love
the
it.
interesting things that it says on the readjax.org website is that the slogan 20 minutes a day paves the way because research has shown just 20 minutes of reading or being read to can provide time for parents and caregivers to bond with their children, expose children to as many as 1.8 million words per year,
Wow.
help students reach the 90th percentile on
Yes.
standardized tests and so many other things. But here's what I want to go back to because I'm getting ready to go there, so hold on to your socks. Readjax.org is a community effort to improve third grade reading scores of students in Duval County. So now let me just tell you another interesting fact about third grade. Some folks who know more than me say that you can tell how many they base the number of prisons that are built on the number of something to do the connection between third graders, and I'm botching it up so much about third graders and prisons, that whole pipeline to prison thing. So they can kind of predict how many people are going to be incarcerated from where they are in third grade. Again, if somebody's listening who knows that better than me, dial in to 904-469-8488 and explain that strange phenomena. So it's so interesting how these folks have figured out how third grade is so pivotal in a child's life and how it influences their future. Tyrone, did you find something? Because I know you're the technology guy and you're looking.
So right here it says politicians and journalists have often claimed prison planners use third grade reading scores to predict the number of future prison beds needed. While it has been found that this claim is mostly urban, in fact, a strong connection between early low latency skills and the county prison and incarceration rates.
You know what those politicians, because they don't read themselves, half of them. But what they do have in their library of things they can access, probably from multiple stocks, companies, actuarians that go back and look at that kind of stuff. I want to say this real quick, and then we can get right back to what you were saying. One of our listeners, and he should have, I wish he would have put it in the chat, but Dr. Ken Jones says, I bring all the books of my children to my office and tell patients to take any book for themselves, their grandchildren or their children. And we have given away at least 300 books. That's a great idea because I got a zillion of them upstairs. And I think I'm going to do the same thing.
Great idea. Great idea.
You think about what as people are planning what their children are going to do for the summer, just one of my friends, I won't identify them, but one of my friends once said that she noticed that her children from the summer, they were active in sports and all kinds of activities, but she noticed when they went back to school in the fall that they were behind, having a hard time. They were struggling, getting started. So it was at that point that she made them read a book a week. And what she would do is read the book also.
Yeah, there you go.
And that way she could have a discussion with them, right?
Yes. And
so you think about the value of that. What it does, it enhances the parental and child bonding as mentioned Readjax, and it also exposes those children. And I know someone else said they like to read because reading takes them places that they might not otherwise go, right? If you read about some country or some city or whatever, or a location, park or whatever.
Subject matter.
Yeah, it takes you places that you've never been before. So you just think about the significance of it. I think Dr. Kane and Tyrone, we need to make sure that we bring some folks who are engaging, who there are some phenomenal youth leaders and youth serving organizations out there. I think we should bring them on and let them talk about some of the activities that they have planned and recommendations that they make for parents as their children are out for the summer. Sure, we want our children to get out and enjoy nature as far as parks and beaches and lakes and things. Intellectually, we need to also make sure that we continue to keep them stimulated and buy them books. Don't just buy them a bag of chips and candy when you go to the store. Grab a little book, and you don't even have to buy the book. Get a library card. Our library systems throughout the country are still open and available to families. So, even if you go once a week and let your children pick out however many books you think they can read, obviously based on their age and whatever, what have you, that they can read in a week, every week, make a visit to the library. And also by doing that, it could help them to decide what they want to be. I know, for instance, I don't know who or what influenced Dr. Kane to become a doctor. Never heard that story, by the way, Dr. Kane. I'm sure that's an interesting story, right? I can tell you what
we won't get into it right now.
But I'm going to share with you what inspired me to become a health educator is because I saw my great grandparent, and my great grandmother and her illnesses, and my grandmother and her illnesses, and it just intrigued me to want to know more about health, so that I could not only help myself but also help educate others to reduce their risk. Because I thought how sad it is for your mind to be okay, but your body to be so broken and damaged that it we talk about the years of potential life lost, the quality years that each of them could have had, but the years that were cut off because they neglected their health for whatever reason. Back in the day, when we talk about the subject that we don't like talking about, it's uncomfortable. When we talk about racism, we know access was an issue for them, right? Access to health care, access to healthy foods. So access to a safe place to exercise. Access was an issue in so many different ways.
That's not back in the days. That's presently. Back in the days is when you would start looking at going to the bean field, going to the agricultural job, doing that hard labor that and working 12 and 18 hours a day that did not give you time to read, and so on and so on.
And take care of your own health. Yeah, so that's what inspired me to get into health, because I wanted to learn a lot so that I can help others. So one of these days, Tyrone, we're going to get that story out of Dr. Kane, what inspired him to be a medical doctor, right? Just the fact that he didn't want to answer it means that there is a story behind that.
There's a story behind it. But
I'm sure it's a really good story behind it. So
there's a definite story behind it, and some of my family members know it, and but they haven't necessarily heard it. The biggest people that probably heard it is the wife. Even the kids, some of the kids haven't really heard the full story behind it. But I want to do this because
hold on before we do that. So if you had not been a doctor, I always wanted to know, would you have been a comedian?
Well, let me tell you I will tell you that part, why we are why I do this. Believe it or not, my mom had 4 boys, 4 girls, and everybody were comedians. Okay, simply because we learned that laughter dissipate pain, anguish. And so there's a lot of things we laugh at, but one of the things they made sure we learned to do is laugh at ourselves, because you have no business laughing at anybody else if you can't laugh at yourself. So I did pretty much, we will. I'll say this. It sounds a little bit morbid, but I remember being at a family member's funeral, and some things that happened was, we're making jokes about it. not about the funeral, because that person couldn't hear us anyway. But because of that's the way we deal with pain, with laughter, and so being comedic. Not saying I'm saying that I'm good at it, but being comedic just is the way I deal with life stressors and pain. Now I want to switch subject real quick because we got less than 10 minutes left. We need to talk about what would we like to see, and if we can particularly hear from our viewers, what would they like to see for future shows?
All right, before we go into that, Dr. Kane, I do have a call in from Mr. Miller, and I want to try to see if we can bring her in. She wanted to make a comment with regards to reading. All right, I'm going to see if I can bring her into this here. So just hold on 1 second for me.
And I'd like to thank Jamila. She's been an avid listener to our show. We'd like to thank her in advance for her support.
Okay, this is just a real quick tip. Should I go on now?
Yes.
Okay, this gets real quick tip. I went to Columbus, Ohio to visit my family and grandkids last year. And I have a couple of grandkids who are graduating from college. One just graduated with a degree in engineering, and another one's working on a dual degree in psychology, a master's and a PhD. And they stated that when they were watching TV, they turned on the closed caption. And, I know a lot of our parents sometimes put their kids in front of the TV to keep them busy. And when I thought about it, I said, why do they have the closed caption on? And that's a suggestion because it forces the young people to read while they, are watching TV. That's the added, because we're in a new technology where a lot of them are, playing games, etc. But just a thought, they're reading as they're going along. And I just thought that was interesting, that we need to use technology to work with us, particularly the ones who are younger. That's all I wanted to say.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Jamila. Again, yeah, we don't shy. I remember when I was at the health department, we used to talk about screen time. And screen time was the time that we allow our children to be on the phones, the time that they're in front of the computer, the video game, and the television. There is a limit. But then I remember when I think it was one of the doctors talked about, I think it was Dr. Pope that talked about when children navigated to at-home schooling.
At-home schooling.
They had to be on screen time. So now the focus is on how much time that you at least give your children that is either family time, fun time, and not just, and getting them away from the screen, if they can, for that's not related to work, of course, to school or whatever. So I've shared with you the things that were on my mind tonight, because what was on my mind is my experience this weekend. And then when I saw the interesting fact about reading, but I cannot mention, and we're going to talk about it in more in depth in the future, I cannot not mention the tragedies that have happened in our nation relative to gun violence. I can say that I witnessed after that when some elected officials, particularly our national elected officials, talking about we need to do something about gun violence. I overheard two gentlemen in the grocery store, and the worker was talking to another gentleman. He was trying to whisper because he was working, right? And so he was saying, yeah, they were saying, yeah, they're going to try to, I know they're going to try to take our guns now. It's my right to have a gun, because if somebody does something to me, I want to make sure that I am armed. And I heard somebody else say, well, the real question is we need to take care of children with mental health issues. And I don't know the fact, Tyrone and Dr. Kane, but it's not just children who are shooting people. It's also adults who are shooting people. Sure, I can say that, yeah, it's probably right that there are some people with mental health issues, but it's been some real interesting fact. And I love the people who post on social media. I just read it and laugh. Sometimes I don't say anything, but it's been some real interesting facts of how people have said you cannot buy liquor, but you can go and buy a gun. You can't buy cigarettes, but you can go and buy a gun, assault weapons. I would like for somebody to explain to me, who's smarter than me, because I already told you a few minutes ago, I don't profess to know everything. Why do average everyday citizens need assault weapons?
They do not. And that is the subject matter. I won't get into it because it's a long, I mean, it's quite a bit. But I will say at least this: depression, bipolar, um, anxiety, mental health issues don't kill people. Guns kill people, whether you have a mental health or don't have a mental health issue. And I think that I feel this is just a deterrent from discussion of true issues, and that is, do you really need those kind of guns? There's only a certain amount of armor, or when I say armor, I guess I should say of guns that you may need to protect yourself, and most of those are just kind of handheld because the situation is not where someone is coming in your home and they got an assault weapon and you need one to fire back. But that's for another day for discussion because there's a whole lot behind that.
But
Yeah,
just
and but let me say this. I'm gonna be a little bit different from you guys. To try to get to the answer that I would pose to Miss Jocelyn's question is our American system has shown that it moves in excess. It moves to one end or the to another. So the moment you take away assault weapons, it won't be long before you take away them all.
Take
So
away the what?
before you take away them all, before you take away all guns. It is it's the way our system is set up. We move the pendulum in huge swings. Now, the things that I do believe are extremely more important is the process to gun ownership. The process is broken, and the background checks and all the things that go into place to own a gun is is broken. The system by which guns can be sold, if you really look into it, the system by which guns can be sold and how they're being sold is so far beyond the concept of reality. It is the reason why we have all these things happening. And
Now
that's just that's my
that,
humble opinion.
yeah, but that's the exact reason I say it's going to take a lot of time
Yeah.
because you actually I may not be that far. We may not be that far in difference in terms of what you're saying. What you know it, but I don't want my neighbor to own a tank, okay, an army tank, or tank piercing ammo or guns that can literally blow up a tank. So, there is some level of discretion in terms of what is appropriate that I understand may differ in opinions, yada yada yada. But like I said, that's why it's going to take more than just a little snippet or a one liner that can adequately address this subject.
Now
Well,
you
part
you
I want to mention is real quick, Tyrone, I'm sorry, is the politicians say that people have a right to bear arms. If we really want to talk about rights, why are politicians trying to take rights from women to
I'm
make
not going to disagree with
decisions
that.
about whether or not they choose to have a full-term pregnancy or not, for whatever reason they choose to. So it's interesting, though, how when people talk about, I have a right to bear arms, but a woman doesn't have the right to choose what she wants and what matters for her and her family. I mean, but why do rights it's interesting how we talk about rights, and I think about,
And it's
and
just like I said, the pendulum. We always in excess. We don't want society from a political standpoint. It's not about balance. It's about control.
It's about me.
It's
Me.
control and power. So when you have something about control and power, you always have the pendulum swing full one way and then the other way
There's
when
always conflict.
the truth is in the middle.
Yeah.
The truth is in the middle.
Well, okay, so we can go along, we can go on and on with that one because we did, and we also visited women's rights on the last 2 programs ago. So
Yes.
we visited that as well, and of course that's going to come back again because we're waiting for the official announcement from the Supreme Court, and that's going to be a lively show as well. But what else, you guys, Miss Turner? Well, now, Tyrone, let's go with you first. Just give me a laundry list. Doesn't have to get into details, but because we're really pretty much overtime, but I just want to get a quick laundry list of things you can think of.
Well, a couple of things that I think of are conversations that you and I have had. One of them is a insight into the youth of America as they view the subjects that we're talking about. We're talking about, we just spent just a small snippet talking about gun rights and the rights of women in Roe versus
Wade.
Wade. All right. And we are all of a certain mindset. What is so interesting to me is when I have these discussions with younger Americans, their viewpoint is oftentimes a product of their education, a product of their experience from a family standpoint. But it is very powerful, and it's very they're very entrenched in it. So it'd be good to have that parallel conversation. Dr. Kane, you and I and Ms. Johnson, we've talked about that.
Okay, so
we,
that's
we,
one subject matter because we're really running short on time.
yeah,
That
we've
is,
talked about technology. I'm the technology guy, and we should have a show that says, "Hey, these are the hot things in technology that everybody should have."
with
And
periodic reminders. But yes, I agree. Miss Turner, something you really like to see on a show.
I think I, I mean, I don't have nothing in particular comes to mind. I just, whatever's happening at that moment, I like to, as you know, I like to see what the national health observances are. And as I mentioned last time, we were hoping to do Women's Health tonight, and we'll revisit that. But I also like to talk about just stuff that matters. What I hear people talking about, out and about, or conversations I see people happening on television to help us because just as sure as I see it, and I see stuff online, but I think the one thing that stands out for me is it was kind of alluded to when we were talking about overweight and obesity and image and self-image. I think that for people to see themselves to just to have that whole conversation about self-image and what does that mean and how does it influence one's life.
Well, because health matters, as I usually say, systemic racism is one of the things that it may be a series of a couple of things, but I think we need to talk about systemic racism. And then the other part is, and I think I've told you guys this before, and then I'm done. Uh, Highly educated but broke.
mm,
Highly educated but broke. What does that mean? And I think that is one of those topics that we really need to get into it. Obviously, it's going to cover some about student loans and other things that we as part of members of society are seeing and have to endure these days. But those are the two things that I'm looking for I don't. There's a lot of other things, but we don't have that much time. So I'll leave it like that, Miss Turner. Since I'm brought in the show, obviously you're gonna take the show out.
Thank you, Dr. Kane, and thank you, Tyrone. Each week, as you've noticed, we try to bring in topics, and not try, we bring up topics and have speakers to help enlighten us, help us to become a better version of ourselves, and also share information with other people. When I came on the show tonight, I talked to you all about how we got overwhelming feedback from our show on managing high blood pressure last week. It's that example that it makes me feel like we are doing something good, right, Dr. Kane? When we get that feedback, because the bottom line is we want to make sure that we bring value to this discussion. Tonight was a free for all. We just kind of talked about what was on our mind, and I jokingly said what's really going on, but what's on our mind, what things that we've seen around. But again, it's an opportunity for you to look within your own self and your own family and say, what is it that I want to do for my children, for my grandparent? Because we also know that there are a lot of grandparents who were in isolation during the pandemic. And so as you're planning your activities, don't forget your loved ones who may be homebound or who may be elderly, to take care of them as well. Thank you, as always, for joining in on Pause for the Truth. A couple of topics that we are going to have in the month of June. So stick around. I'm not going to tell you what Tuesday we're going to do it, but June is Black Music Month. We're going to go a little different. We're going to talk about Black music and the influence that it has on our culture. And so we're going to have some real interesting folks on to talk about that. We're also going to talk about men's health because, some people still feel that although there are a lot of women-headed households because there is no man present, a lot of people still have men in their lives who matter. And so we are going to be talking about men's health in the month of June, as it is Men's Health Month. Stay tuned every Tuesday, 6:30 p.m. for a Pause for the Truth, where we tell you what's really going on. Good night, everyone. Stay well. Get your COVID vaccine because COVID is still out there.
Exactly.